sport is the greatest teacher of life. If you put in 100 hours of work or 1,000 hours of work, all of that does not equal success at all.
Yeah.
Sitting in coach's office, once again, one of these vivid memories that you have, he starts talking about, when are you going to know that enough is enough?
Got it.
And I remember breaking down the moment that I knew that things were done.
Today, I'm talking to Todd Mitchell, a Division I baseball player drafted by the New York Yankees in 1999. He recalls the tough moment he realized baseball was more of a business than a game, and we explore the emotional journey of stepping away from the sport you've played your whole life. Todd embodies what it means to be a no former athlete and even stepped competitively into a new sport after leaving baseball. So many fantastic stories in this episode, and Todd's story of resilience and identity will hit home for a lot of you. Let's dive in. I like to start this off, and I always ask people, are you an athlete?
Former.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Those were the days.
Uh-huh. At the start here, what gives you that, okay, I'm a former athlete, but you wouldn't still call yourself a current athlete?
Life experiences, kids now, focus is completely different than it used to be. I'm 45, so times have changed a lot.
Fair. Fair. You can't always compete or do the same things in the way that you did.
Correct.
Back when you were competitively in organized sport.
Yeah, I would say, as you grow older, you're physically limited to what you used to be able to do. So you look and you remember doing something and you're like, yeah, I can do that. And then when it actually comes to that point, you're like, yeah, I don't think so.
It's more like the recent attempts.
Yes, yeah. And the reality, smacks you in the face pretty quickly.
Give us a little bit of kind of when you started sports, what were kind of your go-to sports back in the day?
I grew up playing baseball from a younger age. My dad has, you probably won't remember this, but we had a Beta video camera. So not VHS, but Beta. They were smaller tapes. And he has...
ahead of his time.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's pretty baller.
Yeah. He has video and pictures of me hitting golf balls when I was like 2 years old. I haven't seen those in a while.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they've been converted.
Yeah.
But, then along came basketball. And those are pretty much golf, basketball, and baseball were really the only sports that I competed in. Any, high school level or anything like that.
Did you do all three all the way through high school?
I did. I took my junior year. I took the winter off from playing basketball.
Okay.
Baseball at that point in time became more of a priority. And so I worked out. I actually went about 60 miles down the road and worked out because we didn't have a hitting facility here. So we went down to Springfield. For that winter, that's what I did. Okay.
At that time, too, you kind of knew that baseball is what you were going to pursue beyond high school?
Yeah, I was recruited for baseball and golf by both Illinois State, University of Illinois, and a couple other schools were baseball only or golf only.
Got it.
But when it came right down to it, I felt like golf is something that I could have done for the rest of my life. Or baseball, it was kind of a now or never.
That was your time.
And I think the competitiveness of, competitive sports, especially golf at that point in time to what it is now has really changed. And baseball to me, was more of more of an athletic game.
Fair.
And I think that I was drawn to that more so than golf.
Yeah. So you went on, you played Division I baseball.
I did. At Illinois State.
What else happened after that?
Well, after my junior year, I was drafted by the New York Yankees in the 14th round. And then I played a couple years in the minor leagues with them, and then enough was enough.
Fair. And then what happened? Because this was maybe not right after.
From a competitive standpoint, well, I was 21 when I stopped playing baseball, and I still had like a competitive desire, and that's when I started playing more competitive golf at that point in time, and that went on until, I'd say 5 or 6 years ago. I was playing around the country in a pretty competitive schedule or level.
Competing at a very high level.
Yeah, it was, it's one of those weird things, amateur golf,
Yeah.
because unlike other sports, you travel and you're paying to
Yeah.
do all these other things. So, flights or rental cars or hotels or
Totally.
VRBOs or whatever else,
Yeah.
you're out of your own pocket. You're doing that. You're
Yeah.
putting that out there in order to be able to compete. So,
That is interesting.
Yeah.
But you also have to be like, you have to be at that level and you kind of have to be invited into it, or can anyone just pay into it?
some of the tournaments you have to be invited to.
Okay.
A lot of the other ones will have a qualifying process or something like of that nature.
Yeah.
But, looking back on it,
Yeah.
my life competitively has kind of jumped from baseball to golf and now coaching into baseball.
Yeah.
So things have kind of changed in my perspective on what I did may or may not have changed a little bit.
Okay.
Now when I look back at spending, all those hours away and dollars and all that about chasing something that, for me maybe meant something, but in the grand scheme of things doesn't really, I don't know. It's not that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, reflection, and
Yeah.
those are all the memories that you have.
Yeah. There is that piece, but obviously at the time that you were doing it, that you were making those decisions, your brain, your drive, your competitive, it wasn't ready. Wasn't ready to be done.
No, definitely not. I think my transition into competitive golf started at a lower level, just playing, I would say competitive events for us at the time here in a city level, and then moved on to more of a state level, and then more along the lines of a national level.
Yeah.
By the time I feel like I was really good enough to play at a national level, it was 25, 26. It's funny because yesterday was the final round of the Masters, and that was always one of the things that I wanted to do, is to be able to play in the Masters. And this was in 2008.
Okay.
I made it to the finals of the USGA Mid-Am. So that's basically like the US Open, a little bit different format for anybody that's 25 years
Okay.
or 25 years old or older. And the winner of that tournament gets an exemption into the following year's Masters, or most of the time it happens that way.
Yeah.
So in 2008, I made it to the final match and ended up getting beat.
Yeah.
And that turned out to be pretty much my only option or my only chance at doing that.
Got it. Okay.
So, at that point in time, it seemed like something that, I can do this again. And then you realize how hard it really is to
how much you had done to get to that point.
Yeah.
To kind of repeat it, repeat it all over again. And you said 5 years ago was when you stopped playing golf competitively?
Yeah, I would say once my son, he was probably 10 or 11.
Okay.
My desire to play and be gone that much, it went down. I still would like to do that, but other priorities, it's kind of like that going all over the country was a priority. And I know it sounds crazy, but it was a priority of mine. It took a lot of time.
Absolutely.
A lot of hours here practicing and things like that.
Yeah.
And when kids come along and all of a sudden you need to go to a track meet or to a baseball game or whatever it is, you want to do that instead of taking the time and doing the things that you really need to do in order to compete at a higher level.
Totally. To maintain and keep yourself at that high level. That's fair. How are you doing? How are you doing in your recently retired life?
Oh, it's fine. A good friend of mine, whose name is Scott Harvey, every year we play in another USGA event. It's called the 4-Ball.
Okay.
So, and we've been doing that since the first year of it was 2015. And we played in every single one. And in 2019, we won that tournament. And that carries a 10-year exemption.
Okay.
So I'll be doing that until I'm like 52 or 53.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll be the old guys at the club at that point in time.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So yeah, go ahead.
Other than that, that's pretty much the extent these days of my competitiveness in golf.
Yeah. You're still out there.
Yeah. It's
Still
fun.
doing it.
Yeah. We still get that sense of, travel and competing and all that. It just is, once a year.
Yeah. Taking it back. So you left, you got drafted early. You said you got drafted your junior year.
Yep.
That transition, by the time you were 21 years old, you were done playing baseball competitively.
Correct.
Do you remember those kind of first few months, like the decision making around that?
Yeah. So when I was drafted, I had a mentor at the time who was our hitting coach at ISU, and he had other opportunities to go coach at other schools. And he asked me, he said, well, when are you going to know that enough is enough? And I said, well, it's pretty much as soon as I stop moving up.
Okay.
And I think at that point in time, I had 5 semesters of school left. So it was going to take me 4.5 years to graduate. I told him that at that point in time, I didn't want to be, 27, 28 years old, having to go back and finish up school. It just, at that point in time, it seemed like I would be starting the next phase of my life. So I remember my second year, I actually played in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Okay.
They were called the Greensboro Bats, still the Yankees affiliation. And my year started off really well, and they made some changes, and I saw my playing time diminish.
Got it.
And then I saw my playing time diminish again.
Got it.
And so now I'm basically still working out every day, going to the park every day. I would say that I was one of the ones that felt if I'm not going to play, my desire to keep going was not there. It's not that I wanted it handed to me, but I didn't want to be stuck in a city, 1,000 miles from home, basically watching the sport that I've been
pursuing for years. Yeah.
So I had a conversation with our director of player development on the TARP in Kannapolis, North Carolina. And I remember him asking me questions and me asking him questions. And that guy's name is Rob Thompson, who is now the manager for the Phillies.
Amazing.
So I've wanted to play the sport of baseball.
Totally.
The business of baseball was not something that appealed to me.
Yep.
On that TARP, I asked because I wanted to be done. I didn't want to play with another team. I didn't want to go to, in that span, it had taken my desire out to play. So I asked him for my release so I could just be done with it and kind of had a clear head about it.
Fair.
And his response was, we don't release players like you. And
interesting.
So I asked him, I said, well, then why am I not playing more? In the minor leagues, there are a lot of foreign players. So either from the Dominican Republic or Venezuela or a lot of the countries in and around Central America, they have to secure visas for all of these players.
Right.
And he basically said that it's a bad look on players that they want to sign or to have come play if they have a player on a visa that is not playing. Well, fast forward 2 or 3 weeks, they signed another kid out of independent ball who sits the kid that, one of the players that he was mentioning. Yeah. And that was kind of like the breaking point, like, oh, this is how it is, and my experience, I'm sure other players have had the same thing. I was pretty much done at that point in time.
Yeah. Your brain was already kind of getting there anyway. And then that was, you did your due diligence. Yeah. You kind of checked it out. You had the conversation and then you're like, okay.
And I knew I needed to finish up school. And then I knew I could get a job at a local insurance agency. So I had that to fall back on. Yeah. Some of these other guys, whether they're from out of the country or from even the United States, don't have that option. They don't have that. I guess you could call it a security blanket. Yeah. So, and maybe that's why they stick around and they play, because they don't know what else they can do. Right. So, and I didn't really know what else I could do either, but I knew that my time in baseball was up.
Got it. Did you feel at peace with that at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
I did. I didn't. Yeah. I remember talking with the manager at the time, because I actually left early to start school in the fall. Yeah. Once again, one of these vivid memories that you have of sitting in, his coach's office in Greensboro and he starts talking about things that I needed to do over the winter to prepare for next season.
Got it.
And I remember breaking down. That was like the moment that I knew that things were done, you know, and even though it was an emotional time,
Yeah.
it was kind of like closure to me. I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting any more after that. I didn't want any more.
Yeah.
And that was just kind of, and I think at that time, he understood where I was coming from as well. Yeah, that was it. I never got my release until maybe February of the next year. So that would have been another 6 months.
Okay.
And they didn't call me. They didn't send a letter. They didn't send anything. My college coach called me and said, hey, the general manager of the St. Paul Saints, which is an independent league team, wants to know if you have interest in playing. And he said, well, he's under contract with the Yankees still. And he says, well, no, he's not.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, really? And to me, it was more of a relief.
Totally.
You know, and that was in 2000, that would have been 2001.
Okay.
February 2001. So at that point in time, the internet and all the information, you know, if you need to Google something now, you just Google it and your information.
Right.
So I remember having to wait and pick up a magazine called Baseball America.
Yeah.
And then finally seeing my name on the list.
Seriously.
Yeah. And then being like, okay, yeah, it is true. But, you know, I didn't get it.
But that's your only like proof of it was like, it's like, do I need to rip out this page to have like proof that my contract's actually
I was done.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah. But also a kind of a beautiful thing that I'm sure it didn't play out exactly how you wanted it to, or how it could have, you know, but you being able to be at peace and know how you truly felt about it.
Yeah. I think it's security in what you saw happening.
Yeah.
And then you giving it a shot to get to where, you know, because of that, when you get signed, you know, when you get drafted or signed and you get a chance to play major or minor league baseball, your goal is to get to the big leagues.
Totally.
I don't know if I ever really believed that I would get there.
Okay.
I just knew that I liked playing. And it could have changed, but I think with the way things worked out, I was at that point in time, once I had that meeting with our manager, I was okay with it.
You were like, okay, this is how I feel. This is how I feel about it.
I was okay with it.
Yeah. Do you feel like just as a person at that time in your life, like, were you, like you said, where it's like, okay, once you hit that manager moment, it's like kind of had that breakdown. Do you feel like you were in touch with kind of your emotion? I know.
Yeah. Looking back on it.
Yeah.
It's tough to describe that other than it was probably maybe deciding that I was going to play baseball in college and then where I was going to play. I think that was a mature decision.
Got it.
I didn't really have a decision to make when I was drafted. Like, we gave them kind of the number of where we wanted them to get to. They got to that number.
Okay.
And so now it's, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
I think looking back on it, it was probably outside of deciding what school I was going to play for, maybe the second mature decision that I had to make, having everything play out the way that it did. I think it was the right one.
Yeah.
But I don't really, other than realizing, I think that day in the manager's office, it was, even though that I knew that this was in my own head that I was going to be done. Yeah. Having to tell somebody else that, you know, maybe even outside of my parents or, you know, my girlfriend, fiance at the time, like what was going on. I think actually saying it to someone else, I think that was the final straw for myself. And then it was complete. And I think that, you know, playing baseball since the age of 7, you know, 6 or 7. And then having it be done and knowing that that's not something that you're going to do anymore. And after you've obviously enjoyed it for that long of a time, and then, you know, calling it quits, that's, I think that, you know, it's an emotional decision. And like I said, I'm not, I guess I was kind of an emotional player, but more out of probably anger,
intensity and anger. Yeah, yes.
not being able to deal with failure that well. But in terms of feelings and things like that, there weren't really any of that.
Yeah.
At all.
He's like, yeah, no. We're good at putting those on the side. That is such a common thing. And so many people in different ways. And whether it was, related to a decision that had to be made or related to something outside of their control, injury based, or a coaching decision or just a bad fit in like athletes across the spectrum, kind of no matter when they stop playing. I hear this so often just of the okay, so we need to kind of keep the emotion side at bay so that we can accomplish what we're looking at. But then when it comes to decision making and when it comes to kind of the end of playing, it's like, well, how can that not be emotional when it's all we've known? And like you said, it's like, from 7 to 21 at the time, it's the majority of your life. It's your formative years. It's what you write at the top of the paper when you describe yourself, right? Like, what's the first thing you write when it's like, okay, write down adjectives for yourself.
Yep.
That's priority number one.
Yeah.
And then now I can only imagine, a couple more years have passed.
Yeah. And you said it basically when you describe yourself and what you write on the sheet of that paper. You do it internally and that's how you kind of define yourself. And now, looking back on it, what do we tell our players?
Yeah.
Don't be defined just because you play a sport. You're not just a baseball player. You're not just a golfer. You're not just a basketball player. Whatever sport you do, you're not just that. You're more than that. This is something that you do. It's not who you are.
Yes.
The best athletes in the world, they probably define themselves at an early time by what they do because they're so invested in it. It is at that point in time, everything that they do is based around that. So it's easy to define yourself as that rather than, a good person or whatever else, but I'm just a baseball player or whatever sport it is.
Yeah.
I'm just that.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, it's kind of a shallow way to describe yourself.
Yeah.
I'm just this.
Yeah.
And outside of this, what do I do?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think it's extremely common. And I think I think if you had to ask people that make decisions based on players, so coaches or even higher levels, how would you want your players to? I think the public answer would be, I want them to be something other than that.
Yep.
But selfishly, to get the best out of that player, I think they would say, I want you to be a baseball player.
Well, and they want that to be top priority in terms of focus and intention and they want them giving their all, right? Yeah. Like they want them giving their all, but you're exactly right in terms of the well-roundedness and in terms of the the athlete themselves being more secure in finding who they are and understanding themselves more to be able to present better to the team. I love hearing that as a coach and working with young athletes now, you guys are sending that message and it's slowly starting to be that yes, this is a piece of you, but for sure when we were growing up, even for me, it's that was not discussed.
No,
it was not discussed at all in terms of I can't say that I was ever told you can't have other interests or you can't have other hobbies, but I was taught at an early age to value and that I brought value to the team, to the community, to society as an athlete.
Yeah. Once again, athlete first. Yeah. And it's funny because especially when I think in high school and in collegiate athletics, you're asking them not to be, or we're telling them, but yet their identity is, and their self-identity is what they do. And then on top of that, it's on the field. It's not what player you can become. It's kind of a, what have you done for me lately? And so the way that you look at yourself can change throughout that time too, because if you're not achieving or you're not playing up to the level that you should be, you'll see your time get cut in half. So if they look at it as I'm just a baseball player.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden something negative on the court happens, or playing time, they're not playing to the level that they should or that they're capable of, how are they able to, one, keep that self-confidence
Yes.
and rise above that and get back on the field? Or is that kind of the first of many nails in the coffin? Being a coach of high school aged players, boys, you want them to keep going. So if they get pulled out of the lineup or something like that, I hope that they don't feel like they're any less of a person or any even less of a baseball player than that. And I think that's where we as coaches, communication is the biggest thing. When everybody knows their role and as it's been defined, I think that that's part of the culture of winning. And just because a player's having a bad day in practice or a game or whatever, something outside of that could be completely influencing that. As much time as coaches spend around their players, when they're away from you, you don't know what else is going on with their life. They could have something could be going on with their parents or their family, or they break up with a girlfriend, or they could have failed a test or whatever it is. But you just don't know. Hopefully you might ask a question like, hey, kind of what's going on? Where
are we at? What are we feeling?
Like, it doesn't seem like you're here today. And you've been here for the past, is something else going on? Once again, that's the communication that's so important. We as coaches or supervisors or mentors have to let these kids know that whether they won the state championship or they lost the state championship, it doesn't change the way that we view them. And because it could change the way that they view themselves.
Absolutely.
At least for a little bit. And then, they understand that, while that would have been nice to win, it's not necessarily going to change my life in one way or the other.
At the time, man, that championship, that state championship, it does feel like everything, and that's okay. That's okay. But when you're sitting here chatting with a friend, just a couple years later, it's like, yes, that's wonderful. Yes, the memories are there, but also it's like, it'll be okay. The world keeps spinning. The
sun is going to come up tomorrow.
The athlete in you. Are there still those moments where you're like, oh, please, I wish I could just go do it for you? Or do you feel like you've been removed from it enough that you're just like, I want to will this upon you guys?
Coaching during a game is much easier than being just a spectator.
Got it.
It's not that us as coaches have a great influence or a direct influence on the game itself because we're not doing anything necessarily. It's not so much that I want to get out there and do it for you. I would say that on the field, the toughest thing is removing some of the emotion from, whether something good happens or something bad, reacting to that and just kind of, staying more level-headed rather than getting caught up in the game. Because if it's something bad and your players see that, they could now all of a sudden they're like, oh man, that was bad.
Right.
You look at did you see coach?
Right.
But that's a tough thing to do, just to completely remove yourself from that. See it for more of like the chess match rather than the instant gratification or instant emotion there. Coaches, it's not that they want to take the emotion out of the game. It's that they want you to stay within a playable level where, as if we know what optimal performance or optimal emotion actually is. But they like to see not too high and too low.
Totally.
Because, it goes back to viewing yourself as either, if you go 4 for 4 or score 30 points or whatever it is, when you go home, you're like, I'm really good. And then when you go 0 for 4 or, score 2 points, oh man, I'm terrible. Well, you're never as good as your best days, and you're never as bad as your worst days. You're somewhere in the middle there. Now, if you can operate emotionally in that same space, I think that's kind of the idea is you never want to get too high or too low because, once again, optimal is somewhere in the middle, or at least we'd like to see it. I think the projection of staying that way, it's kind of like a kid strikes out or a kid walks the bases loaded and they look over in the stands and they see mom or dad hanging their heads. I think even nonverbal is maybe
more
way
so.
More,
they probably
telling.
Can't actually hear what you're saying.
Right.
But yeah.
They get that. Well, as hard as it is, as parents or as spectators, not getting caught up in that emotion, even if it's just for a glance and they see your emotion, how's that going to play on them? And that's when you start talking about human reaction, that's very tough to control.
Totally.
But if you understand that whether Johnny or Sally's Little League game or Little League championship game or whatever, it doesn't really mean that much in the grand scheme of things. At the time, it means the world. It's going to feel less and less with every day. And whether you make the last out or you're the pitcher that gets a winning strikeout, over time, the difference between those two things happening, especially at that lower level, isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, that say the highs and the lows. It's like, guess what? The same kid that hit for a cycle is the same kid that then went 0-3 the next game. You're still the same person. So if you let one of them overpower more than the other, it's like you are still the same person playing the same game. And it's hard because sport is so emotional, and it can be so amped up. But finding the balance.
Sport, in my opinion, is the greatest teacher of life. Because if you can accept all of the failures that are inevitably going to happen, that will help you or later on in your life when on a day-to-day basis, things don't go your way. And I think you can see that a lot if you watch the news or watch anything, you can get a pretty good sense of whether their background was in sport or not.
Yes.
Because, if something goes bad, how do they react to that? How many missed shots did you have? Did you miss any free throws?
Absolutely.
Yeah, tons. Those are all failures throughout the game. Every shot that you take that doesn't go in is a failure.
It's an open circle, right?
And those are just the failures that you can see.
Exactly.
Not
getting to help side, getting.
Did you box out? Those are all things that aren't directly related to the ball, but you have so many successes and failures in the course of just one game that how do you deal with those? And that's why I say that I think by playing sport at really any level, it teaches kids at a very young age how essentially there's going to be wins and there's going to be losses in the game of life as well. And how do you deal with those? How do you get through it?
Yeah, there is a calmness within bad things happening, and there's a calmness and just finding that ability to stay steady and not get rattled too much. Because too, it's like we all want to win. We are practicing, we're performing, we're getting ready for the win. But we learn very quickly that sometimes the loss happens regardless of what you're putting in.
Correct. It's one of those things where if you put in 100 hours of work or 1,000 hours of work, that doesn't equal success. Could it give you a better chance at it? Sure.
Yeah.
But it's a sacrifice that you're making to become better and I would hope that, one, you're doing it because it makes you a better person.
Totally.
But two, makes you a better athlete or competitor or whatever else. But all of that does not equal success at all.
Yeah. There are those things that, do help people in work and do help people in their interpersonal communication and relationships. And it's all those pieces. So, all right. I usually end it as well.
Okay.
Todd Mitchell. Are you an athlete?
Former.
He's like, I'm sticking with the former.
Not anymore.
I'm sticking with the former.
Not anymore.
But also, I feel like, too, you have had so many wonderful, wonderful years competing and at a very high level. It was probably a task, for you to kind of step into that retired athlete role.
I think it just kind of evolved.
Or it happened.
Yeah.
Or it just happened.
There wasn't a whole lot that I could do about it. It just kind of changed. And throughout life, the importance that you place upon things changes. Your perspective changes. And I think as you get older, then different things make you happy. Whether it's being a spectator in the stands or coaching or doing whatever, you'd rather do that than something basically for yourself.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. The things that make you feel good, the things that bring you joy, that are fun, make you feel comfy.
Exactly.
They're just a little bit different.
Yeah, and like
You're still you. Yeah.
Your purpose changes
Totally.
throughout the years.
Totally.
So,
I love it.
yeah.
Thank you so
you.
much for chatting with me.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review. You taking that 5 minutes makes a huge difference and helps us to be able to make more episodes like this. And if you want to see more content in between the episodes, follow us at No Former Athlete on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm so glad you're a part of this No Former Athlete community. And if you know any No Former Athletes that you think I should get in touch with, DM me on Instagram at No Former Athlete. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.